Good Wednesday to you, everybody in Gov 603. Welcome to week, kabam, 8. Almost to modular week. All right, everybody hang in there. Stay motivated, and in my case, sufficiently caffeinated. All right, here we are. Week 8, getting ready to take a little break, modular week. But before you do, okay, a couple of things to go over. First and foremost, I am grading your papers, and I will likely have those finished, probably sometime into modular week. All right, so watch for, don't slip away to Daytona Beach, and if you do, come back to the hotel and check your email once in a while. Okay. There are a couple of you who have not turned them in, and if you are amongst them, you need to contact me as soon as possible. Unless you made arrangements with me already, okay? Because heavy, big part of your grade. So make sure you get that done. Also, you should have received an announcement that the midterm exam is open. If you just click on the announcement, it actually will take you right to the page, all right, where the midterm exam is held. If not, all right, go to the assignment folder, over on the, what is it? When you're in the Blackboard on the left-hand side, and click on, it's right at the top where I'm just checking here really quick, make sure it's, actually second from the top. I guess I can just move it to the top right now. There it is. It's right at the top. All you do is click on the exam to start. It's a timed test. You've got 1 hour. If you don't finish in 1 hour, then it locks you out. Okay. It is a closed book test, no notes, no internet and that sort of thing. I think everybody's going to do fine. There is material on this test from week 8. So make sure that you have reviewed the discussion board questions from week 8, and that, you don't have to have written the answers for the questions for week 8 to take the exam, but you should have answers to the questions for week 8. Does that make sense? In other words, you look them up, you read them, you go, oh, okay, I know what that is, because there's material from week 8. They're part of the questions on the midterm exam. Okay, everybody got that? All right, let's take a look at what you did back in week 7, some of the questions and some of your answers. Here again, we're back into definitions. That is, we say this when we mean that, and this is what this explains. Week 8 this week, we're continuing that. We're going to look at what a t-test is, what an ANOVA is. Now, some of you have emailed me. In fact, somebody called me and asked, well, do I have to work a t-test? Well, the short answer is no, right? Now, in a little bit, I'm going to give you the opportunity to run what's called a regression analysis, and t-tests and ANOVAs are regression analysis. Okay, they tell you how this thing influences that thing or relates to that thing. ANOVA more than a t-test. A t-test just tells you, is there a statistical significant difference between the averages of two things? And don't be intimidated by this stuff. Okay, it's fairly straightforward, and the format that I'm going to give it to you is also very straightforward. All right, but for right now, what's important is that you understand, if you hear the term t-test or if you hear the word ANOVA, what is it and what does it mean? All right, so in preparation for the exam, if you haven't already, make sure that you read through week 8 and you know what an ANOVA is, or you know what a t-test is for, because you're going to get questions that will ask you that. But somebody called me up and said, where do I'm supposed to go to the back of the book and work what? Don't worry about that. Okay, let's go back to week 7. Take a look at the questions, your answers. Okay, according to Pauner, what is an analytical narrative? Use an analytical narrative to test your research proposals, hypothesis, briefly explain the results. And I say results in quotation marks. You're not really doing a full analysis. Okay, Richard, An analytical narrative, quote, provides a qualitative but still very vigorous test for hypotheses derived from an abstract formalized model. Okay, so here's the important bit. You can test a hypothesis quantitatively. That means that you actually derive some numbers from, say, a survey instrument or gathering of data from another way, and you send it through a calculation, whether that's a computer or a pencil and a paper, and then you answer the hypothesis. So, for example, now remember, and I this is important for you to remember, and you've heard this from me before, so if it sounds familiar, it probably is. A hypothesis has three components. It's different from a research question. A research question is just, I wonder what, question mark. A hypothesis has three components, and this is what makes it a hypothesis. Number one, it has at least two variables. Two. When we say a variable, what's a variable? A variable is an event, is an opinion, is something that you're going to measure. It's a happening. It's an anything. Okay, so here could be the variable. The tensile strength of this cup versus the heat of what's left of the coffee that's in it. All right. Those are variables. Anything that you test, that's a variable. Okay, so a hypothesis has two variables. It makes a prediction about those two variables, and it has a direction. So what do I mean by that? Okay. Let's use my phone as an example. I could, they keep tweaking the size of phones when they release new models. I mean, do you remember back when the iPhone, whatever, say less than 7, how small those things were? They were okay. All right. And then they started getting a lot bigger. And then they got really big. Instead of a phone, it was like a phone tablet. People called it a phablet. So what if you had a hypothesis that said the amount of data that people want to look at on their screen is directly proportional, positively proportional to the size of the device? Now let's turn that from research speak into plain English. The more people use their phone to find things, say in the World Wide Web, the bigger the phones are going to, or the bigger the phone the manufacturers would make. So you have two variables, how much people are looking for and size of the phone. You're making a prediction. The more they look, the more manufacturers will make, the bigger the phone the manufacturers will make. And it has a direction. People looking, manufacturers making. Not manufacturers making and then people looking. You understand? Okay. Because you could look at that question the other way. They say, well, the bigger the device that a manufacturer makes, the more people use it to look for stuff. And, as opposed to just straight phone calls. That's a hypothesis. So you can test a hypothesis by creating a survey and counting up the numbers and then running against itself. Or you can use an analytical narrative. All right. Okay. So back to Richard again. In addition, the researcher allows the context of the case or hypothesis through observable evidence, allowing the case to present the conclusions. Pauner suggests that the analytical narratives are valid and viable too for the novice researcher who wishes to make careful tests of formally derived hypotheses. Okay, great. And then you apply this to your work, which I'm not going to read. No, I mean, nothing wrong with what you did, Richard, but this is sort of like, okay, can you understand it operationally? Question number 2, consider the 3-part process Pauner lists at the end of chapter 5 for writing your methodology section. Okay, this one I really want you to pay attention to. In fact, I'm looking for my, I think I put my, here we go. My Pauner, here we go. Yeah, we're up here. Here we go. Okay. Writing your methodology section. Using your methodology, write up from your research proposal, answer each of the 3 questions, really 3 points. Okay. That Pauner notes should be asked of a methodology section. List your responses in the conclusion. Okay, why do I want you to pay particular attention to this? This is perhaps one of the most, maybe next to literature review, abused sections in a paper is methodology. That is, people do not understand what the methodology section is for. All right. So, and then looking, going to Pounder, the methodology section, you should justify your choice of analytical techniques. Why are you doing it the way you're doing it? Does that make sense based on the evidence that you have? If it doesn't make sense, and I mean make sense to the reader that reads, see, when you're doing research, you're not just making the case as to why the questions you're asking are important. You're also making the case as to how you intend to answer them is appropriate. In other words, will provide data that will answer the question. Those are both on the line in the mind of the reader. It's going, does this person know what they're doing in one? Asking questions that are, they're not obvious, like, is the sky blue? Or do dogs go bark? So is this person asking questions that are not already, self-evident and have some import, have some importance? And then does this person know how to go get data and analyze it in a way that will bring a substantive answer, an unbiased answer to the question? Those are both being asked of you and your research. Okay. So back to Pounder. You should justify your choice of analytical techniques. Number 2, you should continue this effort to convince readers that your decisions are methodologically sound by discussing case selection. Okay, so why are you interviewing the people that you're interviewing? Why these folks and not those folks? Okay, and then number 3, the content. I think I'm off a page here. Yeah, the content of the third part of the methodology sessions differs based on the particular qualitative technique you use. Okay, so in other words, how much or what kind of stuff is gonna differ. Okay, so Andrew, you smashed this right on the head. My research design proposals hypothesis are: state of Wisconsin legalization of recreational marijuana will increase the total number of reported drug overdose rates. Okay, so there's a good hypothesis. Or you could use real research speak and say, the state of Wisconsin's legalization of recreational marijuana is positively correlated, meaning it's going to go up the number of reported drug overdoses. Okay. So you choose. So here we go. I choose to use the controlled comparison method. Convince the reader your decision methodologically sound. According to Pounder, case selection involves considering who the population is and then eliminating cases that do not fit the study. Okay, good. Then third, discuss both approaches used to develop their discretionary methods of identification and aggregation. The identification and measurement of 3 data elements in the data sets for this project were identified from the literature sources. Okay, good. So you went back and said, okay, this is how people are doing it, and this is how they define it. Okay, excellent. Okay, question number 3. Go to page 141. This is again at the close of chapter 5. Okay, and you get this in the Pounder chapters. They have these points to consider in this sort of thing. Okay, and okay, and then you look for the exercise. It says practice building. I wonder if I misidentified that page. I hope I didn't. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. Here we go. Okay, yeah, practice building. And if I exit practice building, answer question 1 and doing so reflect on how you might apply the question to your research of your semester project. Okay, Judah. In Howard's, because I was looking in Pounder. Excuse me. Where's my Howard? Okay, right here. Here we go. Christopher. There we go. Okay. In Howard's 2017 scenario, the goal is to find out the attitudes of the community on, maybe concerning the performance of the local schools. The most natural way to conduct this research would be to take a survey. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So what is it, what I would like you to get from this chapter in this section, okay, is, and now we're in Howard. Okay, it says, So imagine that you want to study attitudes of your community concerning the performance of school. Your community is large, and your time and money constraints are serious enough you can't possibly include the entire population. Okay, this is the norm for research. The other thing I have is sort of an issue with this. They sort of set that up as like the exception. That's what happened. That's what happens. You don't have the time and the money to talk to everybody. And this is really what we're doing here, you don't need to. This is perhaps one of the more difficult things for people to believe about statistics. And that is because we like to think of ourselves as, brilliant and shining individuals, and we're all doing our own thing. Okay. That's true to a certain extent. But when you get enough of us together, the thing that we're doing is a pattern and can be tracked beyond the group that you're getting together. If in running a survey, if you can get in terms of number, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 300 responses or better, statistically speaking, that's in terms of the numbers, you can apply that behavior, those trends that you see, to everybody else. Now, you cannot apply it with absolute certainty. You apply it in the same way that you forecast the weather. There's a blankety blank percent chance that it's going to rain. So let's say 10% chance. Well, that means there's a 90% chance that it's going to be sunny. So it doesn't mean that it's going to rain, but it means that it might. All right. If you have a survey number in the 300s or up, you can, and it's done well, you can, mathematically, statistically, safely predict the behavior of everybody else. So the way that text reads, it's sort of like, it rubs me the wrong way. It makes it sound as if that's the exception to the rule. It really is not. And it doesn't have to be, because that's the point of statistics. Okay, but anyway, back to Judah. The population of the survey is fairly straightforward. All the members of the community, choosing who to include in the sample, whoever, is more difficult. Well, it depends on the question you want to ask. If you want to ask about, say, does the school lunch taste nummy? Then you survey the kids. Parents don't know. I mean, they're not eating the tater tots. But if you want to ask, do I think let's pick a topic that's a hot button. Do I think the books in the library are appropriate? Then you ask the parents. Okay. I believe this straightforward random sample would be most appropriate way to choose a sample for the population. Okay. But remember, Judah, straightforward random sample of whom? And if you wanted, for instance, and I don't know this, one way or another, but you might look at, let's say, I don't mean you, Judah, but if you were doing this, you might look at data that describes who, let's say, gender tends to attend school board meetings, male or female. Is there any difference? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the data says, but let's just say let's just say that it's female. Okay, so if you wanted attitudes then about parents, the primary engager within a family, you'd want to skew your sample towards female. My strata would include gender, race, income level, local neighborhood. Okay, excellent. A seriously flawed way of choosing a sample would be to just interview some of the people who came to a high school football game. Perfect. Okay. Well, this may be an easy group of people to access. There's no reason to believe that local sports fans are representative of the entire community. That's true. Now, the way to sort of cut through that is you have a question on your survey that asks about their engagement with the school beyond football game. So, do you attend school board meetings? When did you attend the last, parent teacher conference? How many times during the week are you in the school for, what reasons, et cetera, et cetera. And then those ones that just show up to go, rah, rah, shish, boom, bah, which is fine. You throw those out of the survey or you don't use them. Okay. Good answer. All right. Question number 4, go to page 40, the close of chapter 5, Howard thinking like a political scientist, and find the exercise practice inspecting. Okay. And that's before. I suppose I could have switched these questions around, keep them in order, but what are you going to do? And then the instructions are for each of the following readings. figure out first whether the case represents a sample of a sample or a population. If the author uses a sample, did they choose randomly or deliberately? So here, what I want you to get at is I want you to be critical of the sources that you read. Just because it's in print, made it to a book or an article, doesn't mean it's good research. Oh man, because I show you some examples of real nonsense. Okay, we are in many ways conditioned to think that if something is in writing, it has authority, and no, it doesn't. I mean, there's no one to the other from it's in writing, it's authoritative. Okay, you've got to take that out of your head as a researcher. Okay, Mary, utilize Steve Ropes explaining the long-term maintenance of military regime Panama before the U.S. invasion article to answer this question. This case represents a sample. The author chose the sample deliberately. He first calls out 3 specific regimes: Peru, Chile, Panama, because such regimes survived until the late 1980s. Then he narrows in on Panama because it's particularly important, an interesting case for several reasons. I do not think the selection of Panama lends itself to external validity because even the author is clear that Panama is quite different from the rest of Latin America for a number of reasons. Excellent observation. Okay, just because something is somewhere, or and this is man, is this prevalent in our day and age now? Because something, quote, identifies itself as being among a group doesn't mean it's representative of the group. And I don't have to discuss that in any length for you to understand what I mean. Okay, that's just not research, folks, and that's not evidence. And you, as a researcher, you do not take the subject's word for it, whether that's a whole country or an individual. I mean, there is something going on here, especially from a communication perspective, with people running around feeling the necessity to identify with a community or group. I mean, part of it, I believe, is the security, the sense of self and belonging that was once filled by identification within a family. And as that, and now I'm hypothesizing a little bit. I mean, I have research that backs up these assertions, but all right, indulge me, okay? Because the sense of self that in times gone by had developed within the context of a family, and that is, a unit in which people actually saw each other, connected with each other, interacted with each other. I mean, it's really interesting to note, for instance, that and this was regardless of income level, that the average configuration of the living room in the American home, okay, the configuration of the living room in the American home underwent a dramatic transformation from in the 1950s, 60s into the 70s. And that is, living rooms were typically small, as they were intimate spaces, arranged so that furniture could be put in there that faced each other, because people would sit in chairs and couches and love seats, that is, spaces that were for those that wanted to be or were intimate with each other, and then they faced one another. With the advent of television into the home, that changed. So instead of an arrangement in which furniture is placed to face people towards each other, it shifted, and everybody is now looking at a wall. And if you move forward through the 80s into the 90s, now you have homes being built with walls specifically designed to hold flat screen televisions, and everybody is facing the TV, and they're not facing each other. So you have this sort of breakdown of a human interaction that helps bring a sense of belonging in self. Well, that desire, that need for a sense of self and belonging is not going to go away. That is just hardwired into who we are as social and communicative creatures. Okay? So, we sort of pop it up in other places, and we talk about community this and community that. And you'll hear businesses saying, oh, you're our family. And I'm like, really? My family doesn't charge me if I want to come through the door and, eat from a loaf of bread, but you will. So how family am I to you? Well, we're using these words to take the place conceptually of a community that is breaking down. So, we hear this all the time. Community. I mean, a few years ago, I became gluten intolerant. That's a sad story. I'll tell you that one day. I must have done something wrong because, I'm not getting the memos. Where is the gluten-free community meeting? What are they talking about? They never seem to inform me. I feel so left out. It's like, oh, come on, folks, gluten-free community. Really? Okay. So, we have this desire. It has not gone away. As a researcher, you need to be aware. I'm not saying that there's nothing going on and what's going on is fiddlesticks, is nonsense, but you need to be aware that because a subject, whether that's an individual or an institution or a whole thing like a country, says, well, I identify as da, 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 that doesn't make them part of the group. Now, depending on what your question is as a researcher, that does tell you something about how they see themselves in relationship to the everybody else, which is, sort of stock and standard of political science. All right. So I'm not taking sides or taking swipes at what is a very hot issue in our culture today. That's not the point. The point is, as a researcher, you need to have a clear eye, and if Panama is an outlier, then you can't extend external validity to the so-called Latin world because it's not a monolith. It's not the same throughout. Okay, so excellent point, one and all. Okay, folks, we're going to keep it under a half an hour today. Hoorah! Remember to take the midterm exam. So go, and it closes. It's open now, and it will be open until Friday night, the night of the 3rd, like 11:59 to the stroke. 11:59 Eastern Standard Time. We're coming up on daylight savings here soon, so we're gonna have to change that. But then it's closed and it's done. Once you click on it and you start, you get one crack at it, and you get 60 minutes to finish. Don't close the exam until you're finished, because if you close the exam before you finish, then you cannot get back in. Okay. All right, everybody, have a blessed week. I think about you. I pray about you. I hope you are well. All right. Hang in there. Modular Week is just around the corner, and I'll see you on Blackboard. God bless. Bye-bye.